Hi, everyone, and welcome back to the show. I am your host, Mike Malatesta. On this podcast, I dig in deep with every guest to get to the roots of their success, to discover not just how it happened, but why it matters. My mission is to expose the ideas and clues you need to inspire, activate, and maximize the greatness in you. Hey, everybody, welcome back to the How Did It Happen podcast. I'm so happy to have you here, as I am every week. Thanks for joining me. And today, I've got another amazing success story to share with you. I've got Peter Feigin on the show. Peter, welcome to the How Did It Happen podcast.
Thank you for having me.
So I owe a debt of gratitude to Giacomo Feluca for connecting me with Peter to be on the show. Giacomo was on the show before. I don't remember which episode, but he's another amazing success story. And so I do thank you, Giacomo, for making the introduction. So let me tell you about a little bit about Peter and why you should be as excited as I am to have him here today. Peter Feigin is the president of the world champion Milwaukee Bucks and also president of the Fiserv Forum. He brings more than 2 decades of dynamic corporate leadership to Milwaukee's sports and entertainment scene. His talents, hard work, and dedication are the driving force behind the transformational vision for not only the Milwaukee Bucks and Fiserv Forum, but for the city of Milwaukee and the state of Wisconsin. Since taking over as president of the team in October 2014, Peter has completely reimagined, rebuilt, and re-energized the team's business operations, resulting in substantial increases in attendance, ticket revenue, merchandise revenue, partnership sales, TV viewership, and wins. He has assembled a top-flight management team and has nurtured a corporate culture marked by accountability, collaboration, and fun. The Bucks were named one of the Milwaukee's best places to work in 2015, 16, 17, 18, 19. Maybe there's 20 or 21, Peter?
I think we've got one of those years. Yeah, I might have skipped pandemic year of
okay.
Was shut down, but
his inspirational leadership was recognized with his being named the Milwaukee Biz Times 2015 CEO of the Year. Peter's vision was instrumental in the financing, planning, design, and development of Milwaukee's new 30-acre Deer District, which is anchored by the Fiserv Forum. And you probably saw, if you were watching the NBA Championship last year, what an amazing place it is to host a crowd of people that are having a really, really, really good time. Peter's experience cuts across a wide spectrum of business and entertainment corporations, from the NBA to private aviation, and from digital media and motion pictures to theme parks. And beyond all that, he's been amazingly entrenched in the philanthropic community here in Milwaukee and in Wisconsin. And for a person that's not even from here, and I'm from Philly, by the way, so I'm sort of a transplant here as well, but I've been here much longer, Peter. You may be the second most, the person who's had the second biggest impact of any transplant that's moved here besides me. But yeah, so let's get started. Peter, I ask everyone the same question to kick things off, and that is, how did it happen for you?
Yeah, kind of a loaded question. I guess like 1,000 points of contact, but if you really thought about the focus, I was really kind of lucky / blessed with like unbelievable upbringing, 2 great parents who were professionals and kind of gave us the guidance and really led us to kind of core principles of working hard, of kind of being ethical and honest and understanding how to set goals and objectives, which is kind of a unbelievable advantage to have that at home. And then I think professionally really had, a career that really didn't let any opportunity go untaken. For me, whether it was at Six Flags, whether it was at Marquis Jet and then NetJets, whether it was at McAndrews and Forbes, part of my drive is part enthusiasm, part curiosity, part really drive to learn everything I possibly can and kind of explore opportunities. And then the last piece of it is I kind of call it collecting people. I think my success has been really is about other people and how to how to build relationships and how to network and how to use resources. And I really, tell people, and I tell a lot of college students and graduate students, like, make no mistake, it is who you know, and it is how you collect people. It is how you forge relationships. It's how you learn, through others in a big way. And that's been, like just an unequaled advantage to how things happened. And how I got this job is kind of like one of the most amazing kind of stories in the world. I had been kind of a marketing sales professional. I learned operations, but at the end of the day, my identical twin brother, who runs a private school in New York where all of Wes Eden and Mark Lazzary's kids went, was in a parent conference with Mark Lazzary maybe 15 years ago, and just happened to mention that he was going to start looking at investing in teams. And my identical twin brother suggested, like, oh, you should call my brother. He's the chief marketing officer at Madison Square Garden. He would be different than your hedge fund portfolio guys. Like, he actually can give you real industry insight, understands the P&L, and could go forward. And to make a long story short, like, I kind of went on the first visit to Philadelphia to the 76ers when Comcast and Schneider were first looking to sell that team, and kind of moonlit with Mark and his team for the next, probably 5-7 years, looking at all different teams and opportunities, till one day he called me on a Thursday night and he said, hey, any chance you can get to Milwaukee tomorrow on Friday to talk to this Senator Cole and see if he's serious about selling a team? And I was like, yeesh, let me see. Like, what? In long story short, 24 hours later, I called him and I said, oh, he's serious. And if we are serious about keeping the team in Wisconsin and in Milwaukee, like, he's very, interested in us being the buying group.
So you were the first person that met with Senator Cole then? You were sort of the advanced team on that?
Mark, I think there have been conversations before. I don't think there had been meetings. And Wes Eden certainly had kind of spearheaded this with Allen and Co. But like, as we started to talk about the real expectation of the prospect of a deal happening, was kind of, we all sat down together, in Milwaukee, which is kind of interesting.
And these other meetings that you'd been on prior, you mentioned the Sixers and some others. What was it about those that wasn't right, or what got in the way of those moving forward with one of those opportunities?
I always think, wasn't the right time, wasn't the right opportunity, wasn't the right price, wasn't the right mix. Some opportunities we're not really buying. We're buying fractions, versus being able to operate. So, at least in Mark's case, like, he was very interested in kind of control and what the opportunity would be to revamp and kind of think about, growth. He is a huge basketball fan. So, we looked at some NFL teams, but he really wanted to think about basketball, and he's a New York / Connecticut person. So he wanted to also not only a basketball, but is there a team within flying distance that made sense that he could go to a majority of the games?
Okay. And you mentioned this thing about collecting people. So before I get back to that, the story about how you got to Senator Cole, this collecting people thing, how should people think about that, Peter? Because I love the phrase, and you sort of mentioned, sort of networking and these other things, but how do people really go about collecting people, and how do people become someone that wants to be that wants to be collected or wants to be a collector?
Well, I'll answer the last question for, how do you become one that wants to be collected? I honestly feel that a majority of the people are like more than willing to help, assist, and play together. I really do. Like, in the right prospect, there are very few people that do not want to help, like the young executive or the new graduate, kind of think about, explore, have an opportunistic interview. Like, if directionally you can ask somebody for help, I really do think a lot of people like want to help. And I think if you are curious and if you are interested and you kind of put a broad, blanket across people and what they do and interest, it's kind of what drives me. So, and then I think it's work. Collecting people is work. Like, you actually have to listen. You actually have to communicate. You actually have to stay in touch. I think, our mobile devices help that a lot more now than before. But, early in my career, I would write, hundreds, if not thousands of thank you notes, which I've continued to do, like in Milwaukee. Like I understand everything from, kind of my sales days when it's people's birthdays to reading everything you could possibly think about and kind of, sending things I think they might be interested in, to them. I mean, these little touch points. And then the way life goes is like, there's always kind of the time and place where these connections, are really beneficial. And by the way, I think collecting people, like you said, it's a dual role. Like you've got to be willing to be collected as you're collecting. So it's kind of, that's the way it really works. It's like, I think in your description of that, you make it, that's the way things like work perfectly. Like if you're willing to contribute, obviously the ones you're collecting are willing to contribute.
And do you buy into the notion that, being interested in someone first is the sort of one of the best ways for someone to be interested in you?
I do. I mean, I do think business takes on a different kind of thing. I think there's like, it's kind of inexcusable for somebody who's interested in an industry or a person or anything, not because it's at your fingertips now, not to do enough research, not to understand kind of a baseline of who a person is, kind of directionally what a company does, so you can kind of almost pre-qualify and have, go beyond, the initial discussion of let me explore and investigate, but you can kind of really evolve a relationship, on knowledge. And by the way, you can pre-qualify as well, as you're going through that process.
You don't have to collect everyone, in other words.
Right.
Yeah. So you and your brother, Daniel, ended up at Franklin and Marshall together. You're identical twins. You went there, you played soccer there. I think both of you played soccer there, and you ended up becoming the captain or maybe even the co-captains. I'm not sure. But I'm wondering how, what was, before I get to what was life like after that, what was life like before that, Peter? When you mentioned your parents and this sort of stable, nourishing childhood that you had, what were you thinking about and what was influencing you before you got to college?
Yeah, I think, obviously, kind of emotionally, psychologically, I always had loved sports. I participated in sports. That was like the outlet you could ever, I kind of defaulted to. I think interestingly enough, like I always loved biographies. I always loved, kind of business briefs. I used to read, the business section of the New York Times every day as like my parents discarded it, and kind of understood where it was. So I think at a very early age, I kind of got captivated by, and I don't know how, but like the concept of generating revenue, how to build businesses. I think very early on, that's all I thought about it was like, wow, how do companies make money? How could you sell more? Who are your consumers? My mom was an advertising executive, for 40 years. My dad was a consumer products person. So, the other part about it is like our Sunday dinner conversations, was kind of like a family business school, if you could kind of absorb it and get it. And that's what really like became my passion, whereas my oldest brother went into the fitness world, my twin brother went into education, run school. But for me, that very early on, like I was beyond interested in how to forge businesses, whether it was, going to a soccer tournament and constructing a hot dog stand to retail, beverages and hot dogs, or whether it was like how, as the digital world, kind of started to evolve, what's the call to action? How do you database and how are things sold? So I was always kind of mesmerized by everything from QVC to Procter and Gamble.
And the hot dog stand thing is interesting. What other entrepreneurial things did you do as a kid, or what did you do to make money, or what did you do to?
So I would say like it probably happened before. It's a little bit, but Manhattan being so dense, there was a big market for dog walking. So I wanted to become the ultimate monopoly dog walking institution on the Upper East Side of Manhattan. So I had a little dog walking business of which I started to, much like in previous lives, like when you subdivided your paper route, I would have other folks, taking some of the dog routes and taking a vig from their dog walking things. One of them being my twin brother, who was kind of one of our biggest arguments. Either was the revenue distribution of dog walking money. One as a provider of the business and one as the actual walker. I don't think he thought I deserved a big enough cut of the money. But I think very, very early on, I was a big and a little bit different. I was a big dog walker, and I was a big, like, through high school, babysitter. I know that sounds kind of crazy and weird as a male, not too many male babysitters, as you got into the 80s and 90s, but I made a killing. Like, I loved generating cash revenue, as a young teenager.
Did you have a go-to family that you worked with, or did you?
I did. I actually kind of I had the high school English teacher, and then I had, interestingly enough, like a bunch of parents who kind of entrusted me with their young kids, and I was incredibly impulsive, incredibly loud, incredibly, enthusiastic, but I think they saw that at the end of the day, I was very responsible, and they could, and there was a lot of, there was a good multiple with multiple kids. If you can get the baby with the 3-year-old and the 5-year-old, it was a long night, but you could probably, in those days, you could really charge like the $15 an hour if you were doing the 3 kids.
Sure. Huh. And were you and your brothers competitive, protective? What would you, encouraging to one another? How would you describe it?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if we're typical family. We had an older brother who's about 5 years older, who kind of was like that next generational, who certainly was like very involved. And I consider the rule of I can tear my little brother's arms out of their sockets, but nobody else can. I think that was kind of a fair, loving, thing. And then I think my twin brother and I don't know how many identical twins or kind of nature versus nurture. How do you think? But it's a different relationship. It's extremely special. It's funny. Your first question of the podcast: how did you get here? How did it happen? Well, I think there's this unbelievable advantage to having somebody who is born exactly when you are, who lives with you, who is your best friend, who is your schoolmate, who is your life mate, who you go to, the embedded security and, really the confidence, that you have when you have that teammate for life.
Right.
Could be like one of those invisible, unfair advantages that identical twins and multiples have, because it certainly was for me. I mean, if you think about every rite of passage, whether it's your first day of school or whether it's you're going away for the first time, think about the security of always having that person, whether they're with you or not directly with you, but they're there. It's the closest relationship you could possibly, find.
It's funny. I went to school at Dickinson College, which is right up the road from FM.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah.
And in my fraternity were two identical twin brothers, Todd and Mark Connor. And so I got that was my sort of firsthand, and probably my only, because we all lived together, my only sort of observation into that world. And it was very unique because, first of all, you got this whole dilemma about people mistaking you for the other one. And then each of you have your own personality, but people assume you're the same. Right. And it was always fun because in the beer pong championships, I was Mark's partner and Todd had another partner, and we always seemed to end up playing each other. And it was neat because we were two teams playing each other, but they were playing each other too, like one-on-one sort of thing. So it was a really neat dynamic for me to observe when I was in school.
Yeah. I think you experienced it. So think of that almost secret language, the nonverbal, you don't really have to over communicate to think the same way. And, think of your closest friend, your mate, your wife, your husband, kind of like when you click and somebody walks in the room and you both kind of understand or know, think the same way about a person, think about that moment, times a million, like every moment of the day, every interaction.
Did you guys dress the same way for a while? Did your parents
We
dress
didn't.
you
I think early on you kind of get the baby gifts that are clothes, but I think our parents were very, very, kind of particular, right? So to make sure we were in different classes, to make sure we had different hobbies, like I learned to skate, he learned to play tennis, like to try to give us, as much a separate path as possible. It's kind of a failed experiment, but they tried really hard.
Okay. And then, so when you got to F&M, that's in Lancaster, PA, for people who don't know, it's not Manhattan. How did you feel like part of it? It's a little like coming to Milwaukee, I suppose, but we'll get to that later. But how was that for you?
I think it was like a great adjustment, a great exposure to a completely different environment. So, it's extremely, much like Dickinson and Gettysburg and kind of all the others, like, it's in its own bubble, extremely like, interesting. It's like a real collection. I felt in this kind of school, which is larger, which was larger than my high school, but still a small liberal arts school, like the ability to play sports, the ability to socialize. And I kind of enjoyed, being in central Pennsylvania, for the 4 years. So it was a great experience. And much like other folks, in their late teens and early 20s, found a core of friends and kind of guess you go through your intellectual and emotional growth, spurt during that time. So it was great. I really kind of appreciated F&M in a big way. So it worked for me. And I had that kind of extra injection of security and comfort in that, I had my brother there, which was fun too. We actually like being together, a little different as you get older and you're separated, but we've always enjoyed, kind of being together.
How close did you come to going to different schools?
Close. It's like a funny process. I think we looked at and applied to probably 5 of the same schools and 5 different schools. And then kind of like, we just had this kind of like, well, why don't we want to play? Like we wanted to play, soccer. If we tried to play basketball together, like, why wouldn't we go to school like together? We like actually being together. So we defaulted to, maybe it was a good process for our parents to pretend we might go to different schools.
And what changed about you from the time you got there till the time you got out? Like, changed about you personally, changed about your thinking, changed about career, whatever?
Yeah, well, I think, it'd be interesting to talk offline of like what your Dickinson experience was. I think like what Franklin Marshall did for me was like to put a real focus and serious note on the importance of academics and kind of core baseline, knowledge and learning and coping mechanisms and process, to learn. So it was a serious, it was a serious environment, which like I hadn't really experienced. I had a very fun time, through grade school and high school, and F&M was like a great structured, kind of academic place where, I kind of learned, like, I think I kind of saw a whole different opportunity and exposure to folks and diverse thinking and diverse people from different places. So it was kind of like a nice eye-opening experience.
When my older daughter was looking at schools, we looked at Dickinson, Lehigh, Franklin and Marshall, Swarthmore, a bunch of schools out that way. And I was hoping so hard that she would choose Franklin and Marshall, because just something about the vibe of that school and the little town of Lancaster that I thought was really cool. Unfortunately for me, she chose to go to St. Paul, Minnesota instead, and that was the right choice for her. But Frank, there's something I thought I came away with it not knowing anything, but from the tour thinking there was something special about the place. When you got out, I couldn't find the first place you sort of landed for work. Was it?
Yeah, so it's funny. I spent about 6 months. I had this unbelievable opportunity to work for a company that no longer exists, which was Probar, which was a group of African American lawyers who had put together a sports agency, and their biggest clients were Zena Garrison and Arthur Ashe, um, both tennis players at the time. And Arthur Ashe was kind of towards the end of his life, and I had spent 6 months helping organize, travel, and execute Arthur Ashe's like clinics and speaking engagements for a period of time, before he got too ill to do it. So I had this little blip, kind of in my career that was right out in like an incredible like experience. Like it was kind of interesting. I was the only white employee to do it, which is, kind of interesting, flopped to what,
yeah, right.
Experience to get done. But that was a great experience because it kind of exposed me to what I call now, like really the event and hospitality business that I'm in, now, like, really sports entertainment and kind of what the power of it is, what the strength of, the communication is in a big way. And then, really from there, I got an opportunity to work at Six Flags theme parks. And that was kind of the opening of the mind of kind of what are brands, what are driving traffic, how do you do revenue, how's it work operationally? It was like a real kind of, oh my God. I remember when I got there, I just was like, oh, if I could just become a park president, I'd be the happiest person ever.
And did you become a park president or?
I didn't. Okay.
I didn't think so.
I left Six Flags to go to Madison Square Garden for like an opportunity, and kind of it's all about, again, it's about people. I had happened to have this exposure to this guy, Chuck Fruit, who is the chief marketing officer of Coca-Cola. If you're familiar with Six Flags, does still, must be 40 years now of Coke can promotions, with distributors and bottlers like around the country, and like a large national deal with Coke. And I was down there for like our annual kind of check, and I'd always kind of made it a point to have access to Chuck, and he was great. He was very friendly, very open, and we met for our biannual meeting, and he took me aside and he said, hey, your company is going to be sold. Time Warner is going to sell Six Flags. It might change dramatically for what you're doing. And interestingly enough, like our friends at Madison Square Garden are going through an organizational change. And I think it might really be interesting to you if you gave Dave Checketts a call, who was running Madison Square Garden at the time, to see what opportunities are there. And of course, unbeknownst to me, Chuck had already kind of pre-qualified me to Dave to work for the Knicks and talk to Ernie Grunfeld, who at the time was the general manager. And that's, I mean, there was a little bit more of a process, but 2 weeks later, I was working for Madison Square Garden.
And just before I leave Probar, where was that in New York, where Probar was? And were you thinking about being an agent at that time? Is that something that was interesting?
No. Okay. I kind of loved the event business. I loved the execution. I was a little kind of blown away by, Arthur Ashe as well, and kind of the celebrity and kind of where that could be. So it was like but it was, listen, I've worked very hard, I think, for life, but I could tell you like that was 16 to 18 hours of work a day. That was kind of a one-man show on anything that needed to happen to be executed, like hundreds of details. I mean, I thought after I had kind of completed, even though a short period of time of 6 months, there really wasn't anything I could not accomplish or execute or figure out a solution for. It was a great, learning with a fire hose and kind of being the default for everything. So it was like kind of one of those magical, moments where I really gained some professional confidence very early on to just think like, oh my God, there were, every day there were 100 issues, whether it was a car rental or the PA setup or, the funding, for the event itself, or, it was just one of those great chapters that really helped me kind of understand that I could probably do a lot of things.
Yeah. And it sounds like the swimming, the drinking from the fire hose thing. everybody knows what everybody has a feeling about what that is. But on the flip side of that, it sounds like that also came with it a ton of autonomy and a ton of responsibility and a ton of just figure it out, Peter, sort of thing, where in most opportunities, you don't get that, right? It's like, hey, no, stay in your lane for a while. And this is how we do things and all of that.
Yeah, no, you are right. I mean, it's like building the trust, and having the autonomy and knowing, you are, there becomes a lot of pressure / accountability / autonomy when you are the sheriff, the fireman, the mayor, the traffic cop, the sanitation worker, and it was really interesting. I mean, I remember talking to my dad at the time where he just was like so happy because he's like, you'll never find another job like this where you'll learn so much.
And you're the person that's making these athletes look good, right? That wherever they go, they have to look good, right? So, So you're not quite 30 yet, I guess, when you get this invitation to go meet Ernie Grunfeld, have this opportunity with the Knicks in Madison Square Garden. I'm trying to imagine what it's like when you walk in there for the first time, what you must be feeling. Did you think you were ready, Peter, or did you think, holy?
Same way I feel every day I walk in box offices and stuff. I just can't believe it. There's a piece of me that's like, holy cow, like this is kind of incredible, but like, how do you center back and kind of think it? So it was times 1,000 with Ernie Grunfeld. So imagine, like, I grew up a New York kid. So I watched Ernie and Bernie show. I watched Ernie play basketball. I had never been in a pro sports office before. And I was like a kid who'd grown up, in a sports nuts, and they're looking for me to run marketing and partnerships, on a pro level. And we sat and talked, and, Ernie was here in Milwaukee for a long time, and then he went to New York, and he was kind of one of the most affable, greatest guys ever. And we had a real conversation, and I had, of course, stayed up, very short period of time. I think we talked on a Thursday, and I came to see him on a Monday. And in my mind, I had been prepared for 1,000 questions. I had talked about generating revenue and partnerships. I thought about their rights, and he looked at me and he's like, wow, like, we're going to have to figure out some way to harness your energy or your enthusiasm to do it. And it was some weird sentence like that. I'd say I'd never forget it, but I can't remember the words. But he almost said, like, oh my God, did he just say, like, I have the job? Like, that. Right. It was like, I remember this moment where I was like, oh my God. And then I was working, then I literally started, maybe a week later. And I remember giving the org chart to my dad, and like in the org chart of the marketing department, all the alumni and like ambassadors reported up in. So like on the org chart, I had Willis Reed, like,
oh my gosh,
like reporting to me, which didn't matter who else was on the org chart. I could care less about the digital, the media, the tickets, the area. I was like, Willis Reed is on this org chart. I mean, how crazy is that?
Wow.
Yeah. So it was a great moment. So, work your butt off, like plan to be lucky. And then when you're lucky and kind of things turn, get ready to execute.
So let me explore that a little bit, because you've got the Six Flags, then the Knicks, Madison Square Garden, you had Deluxe, I can't remember the name of the Deluxe Entertainment or something. You had you've had before the Bucks, a good deal of opportunities. And I had this guy named John List on my podcast a couple of weeks ago, and John is a University of Chicago professor. He's the chief economist at Walmart now, but he had been the chief economist at Lyft and Uber, and he worked at all these places. And I was talking to him about how he made decisions to make changes, to move. And of course, he's an economist, so he started talking about opportunity cost, but he had an interesting spin on it. When I listen to him and I think about you, I think about my own experience, and especially when I was younger, even though I didn't move companies, I moved divisions and locations because I had this attitude that saying yes to an opportunity was always the right thing to do instead of no. How have you thought about opportunities for you, and what drives you to move from one to another?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, sometimes opportunity pops up and it becomes, kind of a bridge, that it comes to you, which is interesting. And then I think, professionally, you have to have some type of honesty to know, kind of where you want to go and where you want to go. And most importantly, like if you're in a place, where you're stagnant. So like I'm, before they would really diagnose ADHD, I think I was probably, kind of the poster child for it. I can't sit still. I'm enthusiastic. I want things to grow. I want like the environment to go. I want to succeed, personally, like kind of in the world. So I think in some cases, if the environment, isn't conducive to that, it's the wrong place, so, it's interesting. Like, and I think if those two forces go, you're looking for the opportunity, but at the same time, the opportunity is not where you currently are, which is a tough realization. People get that. I think that's happened a lot actually in the last 2 years with the pandemic. People have kind of defaulted to say like, what's my passion? What am I doing? Is this, where's my life balance? But I think for me, I've been very lucky because I've taken these kind of career steps that have just exposed me to not only kind of the next tier in marketing or operate, it really opened me up to larger footprints and larger opportunities to kind of learn more than I ever thought I'd learn, and then apply it, on like a larger landscape to get it done.
Okay. And you mentioned, you were serving as sort of an advisory capacity to Mark and Wes as they were to Wes maybe as they were looking at these different opportunities. And finally, this meeting with Senator Cole comes up. By the way, for those people who don't know, Senator Cole owned the Milwaukee Bucks for a long time. You come to Milwaukee, you get a deal done, right? And you to buy the team, but you move then from an advisory role to a real like what made you want to take the role too? Because I can see as an advisor, you're kind of like, it's easy to, I don't know. Yeah.
Advisor is heaven. You kind of
yes, right. You can just walk away. Yeah.
Remember, like I'd love to come to games. I'd love to have access to everything. I'd love to be able. A very personal part of like the whole chapter was, I was like Mark had me kind of on his side. Wes had this incredible woman, Sarah Watterson, we were teammates, and part of my role was really to, as this was all going, is to build the business plan to move forward, kind of in an advising capacity. Not that I wanted to run it, and part of my role was literally searching for the officers and the new leadership to get in. So, I mean, at the same time, I was looking for the next CEO, of the team. I was looking for the head of HR and the head of, and the CFO, like in a real way. So my intention was not to take this job. And the big reason for that was I was in New York City and my father was ill for a long time. And I had just made the clear decision like, oh, I'm going to stay in New York with my dad, on a personal level. And I was doing fine professionally. So interestingly enough, like as time passes, and Mark Lazary had been like close to me and my family, for that period of time. My dad happened to pass. We probably closed the deal in April, May. My dad happened to pass away in June. Mark went to the service, kind of looked at me and said, "Oh, well, how's your mind? Like, what are you thinking?" And I said, "Well, why don't we talk tomorrow, to get it done?" And he's like, "Listen," and we had literally not talked about this at all. "This would be a terrible opportunity for you to miss. This could be, this is to lead an NBA team. He's a dummy. He knows like what a carrot that is, to someone like me." So, that's how it started. And, interestingly enough, like we talk about the real estate portion, we talk about the event business, we talk about, the team and so it really evolved. I think aspirationally we would have loved it, but there's no way in 2014 or even in 15 we were saying like, oh, we're going to acquire 35 acres. We're going to create a district. We're going to like reinvent destination Milwaukee, kind of in like an interesting way. So it's been like an unbelievable kind of ascension to, from aspirational to actual.
And so that business plan, that would be interesting to look at that initial business plan, but it had to be like when you're looking at it, the goal, X number of years down the road, you had this vision. It had to be almost monumental what needed to occur to make that happen. I mean, you're buying a team and you're leading a team that's been, let's say, stagnant for a long, long time, but some nice history to it in a facility that's stagnant, in a market that's probably stagnant, and you're not from the area, right? So you've got all these people to collect, right, to get on your side. I'm just imagining like how do you, they say that like a journey of 1,000 miles starts with the first step. And I think that's always true, but what was the first step?
Yeah, I think like honestly, you kind of set up the case scenario like this was a distressed company and distressed brand. It's one of 30 NBA teams, on like a global platform, like the last in every kind of metric you could measure, whether it was revenue, tickets, wins, and losses. So you had this unbelievable opportunity that you're only really going to go in one direction. So your real focus is to kind of really standardize and think about, how do you build a business? And we had this unbelievable opportunity to almost think of it as a startup. You have a 50-year-old company / brand team that you can actually kind of clean the slate and start over and build the infrastructure, and the business process to build a company, which was like really exciting. And you don't usually get, you spend a lot of time like you can't do, unless you're starting a new company, or else part of the process is you'd have to deconstruct everything and then kind of build it. So it was really kind of a startup mentality, and it was really prioritizing, kind of everything to the day, the week, the month, the year. What did we have to get done? And, number one was there was no future existence unless we could build an arena, and build a new facility. I mean, that was the cornerstone of kind of the deal with Senator Cole, the deal with the NBA. So really, the focus was on parallel paths. How do we find a place to build the arena? How do we upgrade everything, to be like a gold standard company? Because we want to compete at the highest level, not just for NBA players. We want to compete for business people. We want to compete, like we want to be a champion on and off the court. And then start to kind of tell the narrative of like what this is going to be and why. Like this is a NBA team that cannot leave like a small Midwestern city because it'd be devastating, in like a big way. And by the way, we can be substantially better than anybody can imagine, on what the impact could be.
And so you had to present a vision for the future that was much bigger and inclusive, like everybody benefited from this future. Is that a fair thing to say?
Yeah, that's a fair thing. And I think like we're really lucky. So, you get this fast talking New York sales guy, which I consider myself like in Milwaukee. But what Mark and Wes and Jamie did was like an incredible kind of like one of the invisible hands was we got about, 25 local investors, who bought small parts of the team. But the power of having local ownership and kind of who these people were and kind of how they represented and helped us kind of forge the path and meet people and tell the story was like really significant. It's kind of like one of the chapters we don't really promote in like the biggest way, but it was really, as I look back and reminisce now, I just seem to realize like how significant and important that was.
Yeah. So you're collecting people again. That's another collecting people story.
Right.
When you came here, and I mentioned before that I grew up in Philadelphia, so I came here 30 years ago. I know how I felt when I came here. Tell me how you felt when you came here.
So I don't know under what scenario, but I came here by myself, and I've got 2 kids and a wife, and like we love each other and we love hanging out and we're together. And I came here with the thought of, oh my God, we better get a stadium or I'm not going to be here, get in. So I, on an October day, set up shop at the Hilton on Wisconsin and kind of walked from the Hilton to the theater. The Milwaukee Theater at the time was where our offices were, like above. Okay. And it was probably it's probably 15 degrees on like a late October day, walking like down the side of 6th Street, kind of like looking at the streets kind of empty and kind of thinking about going like, oh my goodness, what am I going to do? Like, this is welcome to like the challenge, in a big way. So on a personal level, I remember like, I mean, I had all the support in the world, but it was a little bit of a challenge, like as a lonely existence, when you're kind of starting and like building it and stuff. But I got to tell you, from day one, and Mark and Wes and Jamie know this, and like how appreciative I am. I just thought it was the greatest opportunity, and still do, like in the history of the world. So I was like, nothing could stop me. Like, I was just so excited. Like, it was like what we could imagine and what we can build and how we could turn around a team, like in pro sports, in the NBA. Like, the whole kind of thought of it just got me so excited.
Yeah, it's like storybook. It's
storybook. The whole thing's a storybook. Like, you think about building an arena, you think about building a team, you think about re-signing Giannis, you think about the district, you think about winning a championship with a homegrown team. Like, you couldn't make it up. Like, you couldn't. It's just like a fun, unbelievable narrative that like a few hundred people just like invested their lives in to make sure it happened. And to our owners' credits, I mean, like, listen, like, I don't think they get enough credit. Mark, Wes, and Jamie are like, make no mistake about it. Like, here's their quarterbacking kind of directionally where this is going to go, because, this is like a huge commitment, before anything happens, before Giannis is Giannis,
Right.
Like, people don't remember when this started. I always remind Giannis, you were a 90-pound nothing.
Yes.
We molded you. He says, I built you. I said, no, we built you. No, I built you. That's our argument all the time.
Yeah.
And I said, like, it's just incredible, and then, the transformation of everything from our physical plant to the facilities, to the training facility, to the parking structures, to the medical office buildings, to the arena itself. And then, kind of the evolution of winning, which is like a huge accelerant.
Yes.
On the growth and the value of everything, to like being really like a championship caliber organization, both on the court and off the court. That was kind of the vision, and you're kind of like, you're headed towards it.
Do you think so? I think, by the way, I think you and Giannis are both right. You built him, he built
you. He'll disagree with you, but you should just force him. Just force him down on him.
It's symbiotic, or whatever they say. So do you think you've gotten to the point where the organization is running at a gold standard, which is what your goal was? Or do you think there's still a lot more that could be improved?
Yeah, I think it's limitless. I think we're this irreverent, great Midwestern brand that should really be, it's a global team. Our awareness is bigger in Asia and Europe than it is nationally. It's like, how do we expand on that? How do we become, kind of a global company? I think on the brand side, like, there's nothing that I think would be better than to be the world's team, and kind of how do we think about ourselves in like a big way. I mean, the answer is like, listen, like, we want to have a place where like we set ridiculously high standards, like I would say, like, short of delusional, but how do we continue to build? How do we continue to think about what the future is in innovation? I always use that great example, and I'm not sure if you're aware, but like through the pandemic, we kind of sat around and said, geez, we want to keep people employed. We happen to have the largest kitchen in the state of Wisconsin. Like, what are things we can do? And we built the Cluckery. We built a chicken tenders business, really on leveraging the IP of the team, our media outlets, kind of like, we're all like sales and marketing people. Like, how do we do this? But that's kind of a great example. Like, the opportunities are limitless. We've got to kind of prioritize them. I think we're still in a great place. I think the pandemic has definitely thrown a pivot, which is kind of interesting. Where we are and where we're going to be, I think, is kind of changed, dramatically, just because people's mindsets have changed like a little bit. So we're kind of like re-exploring that. I think we're pretty close to full engines ahead on completing the development, around the Deer District. So, yeah, I mean, I get excited because I just think, there's never, a friend of mine a friend of mine, we used to say at Madison Square Garden, like people would, geez, like you've sold all the sponsorship, all the signage. Like, what are you going to do? I was like, oh, we're going to sell air. We're going to think of creative ways to do like what, there's no end to like how we can think. So I think like that's the key here is like, how do we keep pipelining and recruiting and retaining like really smart people who kind of don't think traditionally and kind of like understand that, it's just a matter of kind of thinking on how we can continue to grow.
I was going to ask about that because with the success and with the accelerant of the championship, I would think that, and the opportunities, the level of management expertise and talent that you need has to keep like going up. So just from a practical standpoint, as the president of an organization, that's got to be, I mean, the team aside, that's got to be huge.
I think it's just like the players, right? You want to attract the best talent. So like, how do you take a championship and leverage it to become that destination? How do you let people know that we're open, to exploration and kind of thinking, and then you recruit those types of people to come so you can change like the paradigm of like a pro sports front office. Like, how do you get people who think differently, in a big way?
How was that when you first got here in terms of people thinking differently? If it could take you back to then, because you mentioned that, the cold, I came here in November, by the way, so it was very similar. And I remember driving December of that month, driving to work every day in the car. It seemed like the temperature was 3 degrees at the start of the day. I just remember that for some reason. But so you're here and you're lonely. You walk into this office in the Wisconsin Center or whatever it was called at that time, and you've got this group of people who've been sort of doing the same thing forever. And obviously you're coming in with a different thought about that. How well received was that, man?
So I think it was kind of like, jumping into the ice bath, to be honest, but there was no other way. Like I felt no other way because we didn't have time. So I think, we probably inherited the company with about, 75 employees. I think the message became pretty clear that, hey, we're going to over communicate. We're going to message the why we're doing things, what we're doing, and like what are the goals to get it done. And I think, maybe half those people left like within the first 3 to 6 months of just not their place. They
not for me. Yeah.
Go. And the people who stayed were like marvelous. They were like dying for, kind of like growth, collaboration, building. It's an exciting time when, a new ownership and management says, oh, we're going to invest and we're going to be the best. And we're going to, like you attract a certain kind of enthusiasm from those who work. So, yeah, I think it was like an interesting, like I said, kind of back to being able to have this opportunity to work as a startup, like it was kind of like ripping it down to the studs and building it back up. And, a lot of people wanted to stay involved in that. Now we're, scaled up, probably a little bit over 320 full-time employees and about 1,100 part-time employees to get done. But that's the number one challenge of every business. I always laugh when somebody says, what's the challenge? Like economy? No. People is the challenge. Like people. It's always, I don't care what business you're in, if managing and growing human capital is, because we're all crazy and we're all different. So how do you do that?
Yeah, we can't be programmed, right? Yeah. Right. It's so all the best places to work awards obviously show that what you're doing is working. Just from a practical standpoint, for presidents that are listening and CEOs, I mean, what do you do to have fun and build a culture that works? What works for you? How have you made that happen?
Well, we have a very open, literally and figuratively, like an open concept. So there's very little, like there are very few people like I don't communicate with like on a daily, to kind of like a little bit different when we're working virtually and kind of connected. But I think, one of the main things for leadership is just very, very simple. It is like, how do you continually communicate, what goals and objectives are, what the roadmap is to get there, and the why. I think you can always have people who disagree with you, but if you have rational, reasons of why you're doing things organizationally or institutionally, you can say, hey, you're happy to disagree, but this is where I know we always tell people like, listen, like the culture is going to change with or without you. Like, we want this to be an evolving culture. Like, if you choose to be engaged, like, great, jump on. We also tell people, like, fairly, like, hey, if you don't have it today, tap out. And then we also say, like, you're going to surprise, it's your job. Like, we want people who want to work hard, but you're going to have a balance. You're going to be appreciated, and you're going to be compensated. And, like, that's our accountability to make it. And I don't have a hard time. I mean, I think I'm probably surrounded myself with a lot of disciplined police for me, who are more, directed. Whereas I do like to have a lot of fun. I like to laugh. I like to be around people. I think the little things are the big things. Like, it's important to feed your folks and understand what's going on in their lives and get a piece of it. It's important to let your employees enjoy what your product is, which is basketball concerts and family shows. And we are in the business of hospitality. We happen to hire people with DNA who, like, are solution oriented, who like to serve, who like to do things. And those people are, kind of generally, like, fun to be around and enjoy to be kind of reciprocated.
And it is amazing that the outgoing kindness, I'd say, that the team that you have, helping people through the doors or working in the food areas, or even, walking you to your seat or whatever, everyone is they're smiling. They're, like, happy to serve. They're there. They understand the purpose, it seems like, and they don't just understand it, they demonstrate it. It's really,
we're very lucky. So, how do you keep people, appreciated at work? I think Midwestern nice is part of it too.
Yeah.
Like, I could tell you, I could train the whole world at Madison Square Garden for the rest of the year, and you're not getting 50% of the people saying hello and welcome to, Madison Square Garden. I mean, it's just a different.
Yeah, you get New York nice.
So you get it, and then kind of like how you build it and who you build it with.
Yeah. Well, Peter, thank you so much for saying yes to this podcast. Thank you for coming to Milwaukee and working through the thing with your family and the loneliness and all of that. And thanks to Mark, Wes, and Jamie for buying the team and doing everything that they've done. And thanks for collecting people around here, because I think people around here needed to be collected in a different way to make these kinds of things happen. And you were, that accelerator or the accelerant, or maybe a combination of both, to help get that done.
Well, great. Thanks for having me, Mike. Pleasure.